Hello, and welcome to my end of year wrap up for the year of 2025. So, we've had an interesting year in the industry, and at the end of each year, I like to just like a bit of a traditional thing that I've started doing the past few years since I started the channel is I like to do like little wrap up at the end, and not lots of YouTubers do this, and so I figured, well, I'll try to do the same thing, and I like just kind of having a bit of a rant about things that have gone out throughout the year and picking out some of my favourite games and making some predictions on as to what I think will happen in the years to come. So, to kick us off here, we've got. So, the first thing I will say, if you've not watched one of these before, is like I say, I'll be handing out some little awards, just my personal picks of games for various categories throughout the year. It's more just a funny tongue-in-cheek thing, but I do like kind of doing it in this sort of format as a way of just looking back at some of the brilliance and some of the absolute blunders that we get in the industry each year. And to start us off, we'll start with what is the buggiest game of the year, because let's face it, there's always one, right? There's always one game each year that's just buggy as all hell. And last, I'm trying to remember what I gave it to last year, but there's always something that's just all kinds messed up. And this year it was really, really obvious. This wasn't even a difficult pick for me. But before we do hand this award out, there are of course there's an honourable mention that I must point out because it really was a bit of a scandal at launch. And of course, that game is Borderlands 4. So, Borderlands 4 this year was just an absolute mess. Now, I have played several of the previous Borderlands games. I tried playing the first one with a friend, but he'd kind of asked me to play it. He said it was really good. We played it like a couple of times, and then I think he got bored and we never went back to it. And I wasn't particularly amazed with it. But tried again with Borderlands 2, and I can tell you now, if you are trying to get into the Borderlands franchise, start with the second one. It's so much better than all of the others. Don't just start with it, finish with it. Just play Borderlands 2. Ignore all of the Borderlands. You don't need to have played the previous ones to play the second one, and you don't need to play any of the ones that come after it. Just ignore them, right? This is not really a franchise. There's Borderlands 2, and then there's all the ones that came after it trying to ride the coattails of its success, right? That's basically what Borderlands is now as a franchise. And for some reason, because the reason it's on Buggiest Game of the Year is, for some reason, even though, like, how to put it, like, the art direction of the game is pretty strong, but the graphical fidelity isn't. It's not like a super crazy looking game when it comes to like the texture quality and the lighting and things. Yet somehow they have made it so the game barely runs on PC and on console really, but it's a horrible running game. And there's it really says something to the game when I will point this out, as I looked up like the gameplay overview for the game, just like some gameplay footage of it, to show in the background here as B-reel, because I don't own it, so we're watching the gameplay overview trailer here. But all of the top results were the problem with Borderlands 4, the reason why the franchise has died. Borderlands 4 isn't it, and that's all I was getting, and then loads of other videos just complaining about performance problems. And it just seems to be performance problems the game. It's to be expected to a certain extent. They've not done a full proper open world before, but that's why you're supposed to take your time with it and really get it right, because this is your first time doing something new, and obviously probably a lot of the stuttering and the optimization issues are probably to do with them not correctly uh, like loading everything in an optimized fashion for an open world game. Because with an open world game, it's like you're constantly loading parts of the world in and out as you move through it. And if you can't do that smoothly, you will have performance problems. And it literally seems that like this basic fundamental part of what an open world game is, they have just fallen flat on, right? I'll not get into the whole because this isn't a review, so we're not going to get into it too long, and I'm wanting to make this a bit shorter uh, than my wrap up last year because I spent way too much time going over each individual game. But to summarise it, yeah, I've heard bad things about the story and in particular the humour as well, and it seems that the game previously had kind of somewhat annoying and stupid characters, but they were kind of endearing in their own way, and Claptrap and Tiny Tina are perfect examples of this. But now they seem to be, and I think this really started with Borderlands 3, they've just become annoying, but not endearing anymore. So you just kind of dislike them in general. And I think it's been kind of continuing on that trend since. But yeah, it gets my award this year for its horrendously poor port and bad performance. But of course, there can be only one winner, and I think we all know who that winner is this year. So, Mind's Eye. This is a game that exists. Though only barely, it's barely functional. Looking at like a trailer of it here, because again, I don't have any footage. So, and God knows I'm not going to pay full price for this thing just to get some B-roll. But it's basically a game made by ex-Rockstar developers, so the people who made things like GTA and Red Dead Redemption, except they've basically gone and started their own studio with the credence of, we're gonna make our own, do it better, and ours is gonna have blackjack and hookers, essentially. And the game is just an absolute buggy mess. It's genuinely terrible, and from what I've seen, it's borderline unplayable. The user-generated content stuff as well is just dead because of course it is, and all of this comes down to it's like right. The feeling I get is that they probably went into this thinking we'll make our own GTA, that's what we know how to do it, we can definitely do it, and they started doing that without thinking, oh yeah, we're not a giant, massive, world, internationally known studio anymore, we're not this worldwide super studio, and they've not kind of reined it in. The game probably wanted to be a linear experience with a number of like little mission areas and things. It probably didn't want to be an open world game because I don't think they had the time, budget, and expertise to be able to make that. But I think they've forgotten that, and they've kind of moved from being this big studio to being this scrappy little studio and haven't adjusted accordingly. So they still think they can make GTA and they just can't. They just cannot do it. And so they went all in, and they really went all in as well on the user-generated content stuff, hoping that that would kind of allow them to compete with the likes of GTA's live service offerings without them having to do the work. But that only works if you can get people on board with it. And of course, the game sucks, so no one got on board with it. If it had have worked, then yeah, they'd have probably been multi-millionaires. But it unfortunately didn't, and they've become a bit of the laughingstock of the industry. Again, the game it is just buggy as all hell. You can find like bug reel compilations online and things. They're going to be your first results if you stick it into YouTube. But I can only think that these trailers were horrendously cherry picked to look this good. Apparently the AI doesn't work most of the time, like most of the NPCs in these firefights struggle to find you if you hide behind the walls and things. The driving feels like it's on ice. Cutscenes and things routinely break. There's crashes to desktop and things. It's a goddamn mess. And again, it's they probably needed to scale things back and just didn't because they're used to being this giant studio and they're not anymore. But like I said, there's always one that manages to be somehow buggier and worse than all the others, and this is the one this year. Moving swiftly on though, most disappointing game of the year for 2025, and it's an odd one this, because when I say disappointing, again, I don't mean worst. This is the most disappointing. This is a game that I expected more from, and it just really underdelivered. And full review of this is available on the channel that goes into a lot more detail as to why I think this, if you're interested. But this year it will be Doom Dark Ages. I was going to say Doom Eternal then, but no. Doom Dark Ages. It's just kind of meh. I would describe it as such. It's kind of meh. The Doom 2016 reboot was particularly excellent, and it's probably one of the best reboots I've seen in recent years. Like, a lot of studios have been kind of trying to reboot or remaster like old games and franchises, because I guess they're out of ideas or something. And definitely one of the better ones was Doom 2016. And it was fantastic. It was just amazing. But I personally felt that, like, the gameplay kind of wasn't high octane enough. I was like, the music's going at like 1,000,000 miles per hour, but the combat doesn't seem to be in time with it, and it kind of makes you feel slow moving around and hitting things, and there wasn't that much on the screen. Like, there weren't loads of enemies. There'd be like one or two big enemies and a couple of little dregs, and that were kind of it. And so I personally preferred Doom Eternal because it kind of fixed that problem for me. There was a lot more going off. You were moving a lot faster. You were kind of bouncing around like some kind of ball of living rage, essentially. And it's quite cool. It's really good, and it felt like it was in time with the music and stuff, you know. And so I really liked Doom Eternal. It was my personal favourite of the new Doom remasters. Well, not remasters, reboot series. But honestly, I think most people will tell you they either prefer 2016 or Eternal. No one will tell you that they preferred Dark Ages, right? And so this is the thing. It's like, right. So Doom Dark Ages, it's just kind of lifeless. Like, this is the thing. The main issues with Doom Eternal, like, I would have said that Doom 2016 is like a 9 out of 10. It's close to perfection for me. It's like, wow, this is a fantastic example of how to do this genre. Practically, like, just, it's a great game. But Doom Eternal is like the gold standard for me. But I think depending which you prefer, you'd probably swap those two around. You know, do you prefer it to be a bit slower and a bit more of a power fantasy, or do you prefer something that challenges you a bit more and is a bit more hectic and resource management intensive and stuff like that? But Doom Dark Ages kind of is the worst of all worlds. Like, sure, there's more on screen and the battles feel bigger and more epic in scale. The areas are wider and more open and that. But I find that the areas being open and such is largely just okay, but now I just have to walk further between fights. And it over relies on this annoying parry system now. Like, you don't feel like you're, you know, going in and blasting the enemy and ripping to shreds. It's like, no, the whole game's just been diluted down to this stupid parry system that you do it and then it like one shots a tank and things. It's ridiculous. I'm just really, really not a fan of how they've changed the gameplay up. But moreover, they've really gone, and the big thing I would say of Doom Eternal, if I were to point out somewhere where it was really weak, I would say that Doom Eternal, it's got too much exposition. It tries to have like an actual story. Doom 2016 knew where it stood. It knew that you, as a Doom player, didn't really care, and so there was a story, but every time the game would try to tell you it, Doom Guy would deliberately like punch the nearest intercom system and cut off communications and then just kill a bunch of demons, and then Sam Hayden would eventually get him over the intercom system again and be like, you turned it off. Oh, look, you've got to listen. This is really important. And then Doom Guy just slam his fist into it again. And that was basically how the story was delivered. It knew that you didn't really care, and it really kind of it was very tongue in cheek, and the story that was there was simple enough to follow anyway. Um, But Doom Eternal started to get a little bit too much into it. I remember at the reveal for the game, they were saying, "Oh, we're going to create a whole series. We're going to create a Doomiverse," and everyone in the crowd were like, "Yay!" Kind of looking at each other side eyes and being like, "Did we want that? That doesn't seem like something we wanted, and we didn't. No one wanted a Doomiverse." And so Doom Dark Ages dumbs down and dilutes the combat, making it this stupid parry system thing. It feels slower, it's not as good, and it goes way too heavy on a storyline that no one gives a damn about. And it's the only redeeming factor of it is that at the very least it looks really cool, right? Like, I'm currently firing a weapon here that's like, it fires like ground up skull fragments, and you can see the skull being shoved into this grinder, which is again really metal and cool. But then you just see the really stupid like parry system, and not just that, but the glory kills have been replaced by just making it go slow mo when you hit things. It's like, what? Why have you removed that from the game? Like all those animations, they're still somewhere over at id Tech. And my big worry is that what we're seeing here is maybe like them playing it safe and just making enough to kind of basically churn out a game. Like, they're not really putting their all into it. It's like, right, we've just checked the boxes and we're going to release this thing. And this is kind of what my worry is with Microsoft owning id Tech and Bethesda and things now, right? That's kind of my main worry about them owning these things. Like, are they just going to churn out the same basic feeling, not very good games over and over again at this point? Or, you know, is that what's going to happen now that it's on a subscription service, or what's going off with that? And so I'm getting a bit worried about Microsoft and its Game Pass, and we're going to be talking about that a lot more right now, because now we're getting into our next award. But before we do that, yeah, if you want to see my full analysis of Doom Dark Ages, you can find it on the channel. There's an extended review there. It's like an hour long. And if you're wondering why this gameplay is a bit rough, it's because it's from that review. So I was talking and trying to demonstrate things while playing it, if in case you're wondering. But anyway, yes, moving on. And so, yeah, the award for worst thing in the games industry this year, and I'm not just going to give it to a game. It's a company award this time. It's Microsoft. But we're going to show some footage here of Call of Duty. And yeah, it is genuinely just terrible. um, Call of Duty has been on the decline for a while now, but this year it's been particularly egregious, and I think the same can be said of Microsoft at this point. We've seen loads of layoffs. It seems to be coming down from Microsoft. It looks like so Microsoft are basically giving Xbox marching orders to reduce costs and create a 30, I think what it was something like they want a 30% profit margin or something stupid, but they want increased profits, yet they're not giving them any time. They have to deliver this year, so how do you get profits really quick, short term? Well, you fire loads of developers. So they've spent years buying out and building up all these development studios so that they can become basically the gaming subscription service, trying to position themselves as such, move into cloud gaming and get to the point where you can basically play all the new games from Microsoft and all their studios that they own without owning a massive, NASA computer. And honestly, it's not a bad plan. I think if anyone was going to compete with Steam, like that is probably the service you would put together to compete with Steam. If they made those like a timed exclusive and just made the subscription offering not crazy expensive, but within reason, to the point where if you are going to play more than 2 games in a year, it will be cheaper to get the subscription service, then Microsoft would probably corner all the rest of the games market outside of Steam, basically. You would go to Steam for games that aren't on Xbox Game Pass, or that you wish to have a hard-owned copy of, right? Mind you, I say that, we all know what I mean, air quotes, owned copy, yada yada yada. We all know that it's like you're renting out a license or something. That's getting into a whole other can of worms though. But it was probably a pretty good business strategy. They would probably price everyone out. They'd probably undercut and price out everyone else and end up being a big player on not just PC, but if they could get their service then put onto PlayStation and Switch and act almost like a third-party publisher rather than a first-party console manufacturer, they could have really changed up their place in the industry here. But instead, you end up with, well, this that's on the screen now, this absolute nonsense that they've been doing this year. And yeah, it's not just in COD, it's in just everything that they've been doing. Like Microsoft, in doing all of this, have literally been saying, yeah, we don't care anymore, we want these profits. I honestly think Microsoft are setting Xbox up to fail because they're looking for an excuse to put all of that money just into AI. I think they'd rather be doing that. So I think basically the suits at the top have changed strategies. They're going all in on AI, and that means that they probably want to just cut their losses with Xbox altogether and then just invest it into a giant data data center. That's probably what they're going to do. They're probably just going to turn Xbox into a data center, which is a sad end for the company that brought us the Xbox, the Xbox 360 and Xbox One and the new Series X and things. It's a sad end. Sony have won the console war, but it feels hollow, I think. They've essentially, Microsoft and Xbox have committed seppuku. They've just killed themselves on the field of battle. So it's it rings a bit hollow. We didn't want it to end this way. But the console wars seem to be over. And getting back to the way that this is going now, we see things like Call of Duty just turning into this absolute garbage slop. Like, you wouldn't recognise this as Call of Duty if it weren't for that kind of fairly recognisable UI that's on the screen. If it weren't for that, this would look, frankly, like something more like you'd expect to see from Resident Evil or Dead Space, to be fair. It's just all over the place this year. Again, Call of Duty has been slowly dying for years now, but this year in particular, it's been really, really bad. And I think it's just kind of the embodiment of everything wrong at Activision and Microsoft right now, where these companies just care more about profits than their games. And it's all finally coming to a head now. We know that they've been like this for years, but it's really shone through this year. The maps are largely made up of old multiplayer assets. Some of them literally are multiplayer maps that have been repurposed. I technically I own this game. I could play it. I could literally get this game and play it for free because I've got Game Pass. But of course, I didn't. Literally, you could not convince me to play this game for free. And it's purely because it's like, yeah, it's not had good reviews, and moreover, it's over 100 gigs to download. I've not got gigabit broadband. It is not available in my area, so I am not going to spend the better part of like a day and a half downloading this just so that I can be disappointed and have my hard drive filled up by it. No. Literally, it isn't worth the bandwidth it would take to download it. That's where I am with Call of Duty this year. And of course, many reasons why. The fact that it's co-op, it's not pausable, even though it's the campaign. Like you can't play it in an offline only mode. It randomly puts you into a lobby at the start of the game with more players than are going to be playing in your instance of it. So you end up with weird uh, weird voice comms at the starts of levels, even though you're not playing with anyone and they're talking over cutscenes and things. Like anyone else would consider this to be like a major bug, but apparently not Call of Duty. Um, and I think it's really woken people up to something, and I think it's getting back into like Microsoft and their pricing and stuff at the moment. So Call of Duty, everyone's always thought of it as, okay, this is a game that is basically it's a campaign that in any other game you would easily pay, 40, 50 quid for a campaign as good as Call of Duty's. Sure, it's a bit predictable, cliche, same every year, that sort of thing. But back in its heyday, like these campaigns were amazing and even kind of still are. I played the one last year for Black Ops 6. It was pretty good. It was a pretty good campaign. There were some twists and turns in there. It was interesting. But now it's this mess and it's not worth it. And so people start to realize, well, I'm paying full price for a game that doesn't come with a campaign that I want to play. It's just a multiplayer mode and zombies. And some people aren't even that fussed about zombies. It's like, right. So it's the same zombies and multiplayer that you get every year. And at that point, you have to kind of ask yourself, is that worth I think it's like 70 quid now when you buy it. Is it worth that? And it's not. It's really not. It's like half the value of the franchise has just been torn off of it. And so you're left thinking, well, why am I paying this much for what feels like an update to the weapon roster on the multiplayer, as well as like a map pack, and then a new zombies map? I feel like I should be paying about 20 quid for that. And then when it comes free on Game Pass anyway, so I think people are beginning to wake up to the fact that maybe Call of Duty is not worth that box price anymore, and it's probably going to have to start acting more like the subscription service that it actually is. Because that's kind of what it is now. It's more just part of a subscription service now. And it should probably be priced as such. So I think that's where it's heading, and I think that means that they probably want to maybe why each year does it have to be on a new entire engine and a new entire... I mean, I know it's just like a slightly updated version of the engine from the previous year, but you get my point. It's like an entirely new box set game that has to be reinstalled and everything, and none of your progress carries between them. Why doesn't it just become a game that every so often gets its graphics updated, and each year they add a new campaign to it that's just an update? It feels more like it should be doing that each year instead of what it's currently doing. It feels like the whole, and I think this is the worry for them, it feels like its whole business strategy doesn't make sense anymore. I think that's the real worry for Activision with this. And I would tend to agree. I think that their business strategy doesn't make much sense now, especially now that it is part of a subscription service. I think they're really going to have to rethink what Call of Duty is going to be going down the line. Is it a subscription service that just gets updates every year? You know, is it just a live service thing that's going to go on forever or whatever? Or is it a yearly release? Because if they're going to... Because this is the thing, it's been having its cake and eating it for years, right? I mean, honestly, why isn't it just free to play now? You know, we're getting to that point. If it's just, multiplayer maps and some guns each year, if that's what it's boiling down to because the campaign's kind of crap. And let's be honest, this isn't the first campaign recently that's been bad. Like, this one's particularly bad, but Modern Warfare 3 and Vanguard were kind of terrible as well. So I think people are really starting to question, like, why are they wanting a full price for it every year? And again, this is another one here of these giant multiplayer maps that are being reused here, just ridiculous. But yeah, why are you paying that full price? Like, they're having their cake and eating it, and they're only managing that because Call of Duty is kind of like a holdover from a different era where you did pay full price for these games every year. And it comes from Call of Duty and Battlefield and other shooters that were releasing at the time. And that's the problem here. It's like, yeah, it's a good question. I don't know if they can keep up selling their game like this, and it makes me wonder, because this is the next thing. Keep in mind, these are made practically on a production line. The next one is already in the works, and they might literally be preparing their next failure right now. Right? They will not have enough time from now to its release to rework that game. So if it's anything like this, we might be looking at another failure next year. And it might involve them having to completely, like, pull the emergency brakes on this. We might not see a Call of Duty next year if that's the case, but I don't think they're going to stop. They're too greedy at this point, and they'll be wanting to make up the loss in sales numbers from this year. So it'll keep going, and it'll probably go off the rails. I think that what we're probably going to see is more failures, maybe not necessarily next year, but certainly in the next few years there'll definitely be another thing like this. They'll probably screw another one up, maybe even more. But I think each time it happens, I think they keep saying that Call of Duty is too big to fail, but I think the correct way of looking at it is that it's too big to fail all at once. If you're going to take down a giant, you kind of have to do it by slowly but surely chipping away at them. They die through 1,000 cuts, you know. And I think that's what we might be seeing with Call of Duty here. I think it's slowly but surely each time it does this. Yeah, from Modern Warfare 3 and the Vanguard debacle and that, we're going to see that each failure is building upon each other failure to the point where it's probably going to it's going to come straight off the tracks and it will fail spectacularly. eventually. It'll be a big build up to suddenly one year it'll make a loss, and no one will, no one at the studios will know why. Whereas anyone from the outside looking in will know exactly why. They'll have seen it slowly happening. And it's like you're watching it in slow motion. But, as I say, it's indicative of, honestly, I think Microsoft as a whole at the moment, and the AI as well. Like, I've not even mentioned the use of AI with this. Like, I'm going to be honest, I'll be talking about it later in like my predictions for upcoming years. The use of AI isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's all about the way in which it's being used. And using it to just do like bits of artwork for your using the AI to just do like player card backgrounds and things. Sure, no one really cares about these little player card things. It's not really that big of a deal. I think people are making a bit of a fuss over very little here. But still, this is part of the game and it is in the full game. This isn't just like some concept art or something. But what really gets me up in arms about the use of AI here is that sometimes when you buy, say, like a skin pack or like a weapon pack or something like that, you can get those player cards as part of the reward, right? Now, if you're paying for something that's been hand drawn and created and is actually quite a nice little piece of artwork that you can put as your player background, okay, adding that, that being part of that package, which is something you're paying for, ain't all that bad. I do still think that it's just being used as a filler item to add some supposed value to a skin pack to make it seem like you're getting more than just a weapon skin when really you're not, and you're probably not even going to use these player card backgrounds. But it really bothers me, the idea that you might be buying those and they might literally be something that was made by AI, like a human never touched them. They've pressed a generate art button, right, on their developer tools, and then they're charging you for it, right? If you're going to make this stuff and it's going to cost you pennies to do it, right, I don't want you selling it to me. It's like, no, I'm not here to buy your crap, That's where I start to get bothered. If they're using this to just cut the costs on the stuff they're trying to sell you and devaluing it like that, I start getting a bit more concerned. But of course, if they're starting to use it there and it's already starting to go into the game, how long before, the voice acting is AI? Before the skin textures and the actual skins that you buy are all AI? How long until that? Because they're showing themselves to be kind of shameless with it already. So we'll have to, it's certainly something to keep an eye on, but again, the way Microsoft's going with things like I mentioned before with Doom Dark Ages being a bit lackluster, literally I almost forgot that game had released this year. That's how much I enjoyed Doom Dark Ages. I found it completely forgettable. Just it's as if it were a dream when I played it. I've completely forgotten most of it. And yeah, I'm finding more and more that a lot of the experiences. I mean, Microsoft, like the big experiences this year were meant to be Outer Worlds 2, which I've not bothered with. Call of Duty is one of the big games this year. I wouldn't touch it with a barge pole. And Doom Dark Ages, which I did play all the way through, it was alright, but it's like a forgettable 7 out of 10 and might be where the franchise dies. Anyway, moving on. So, moving to some of the better games then. So we've done the buggiest, the most disappointing, the worst games. So, finally, we're getting to the good stuff. The games that I want to really reward for being good this year, If I was Santa, they'd be on my nice list. But yeah, this year has seen the release of several great games, many great games, more great games than bad games. And I think it's worth mentioning as well, this at this time of year, that it's like it's not all doom and gloom. And anyone who says, "Oh, the game industry's worse than ever, it's dying, it's on its knees," like, keep in mind that they've probably cherry picked like 2 or 3 bad live service releases this year and tried to, make out the idea that somehow that's indicative of the entire industry. It's not. Something we just have to accept is that as the games industry gets bigger, there's going to be more and higher profile failures, as well as more and higher profile successes as well. And of course, one of those this year, and kind of, it's nice to be talking about this just after talking about Call of Duty, because I think it's really deserved it. Battlefield 6, right? I think Call of Duty has for quite some time now needed some competition, and as such, it's kind of, I think it's stagnation and it becoming quite just kind of bad in general has been a result of a lack of competition. Funnily enough, when Call of Duty came to prominence, it was on the back of Call of Duty literally destroying the Medal of Honor franchise. It was so much better that it basically buried Medal of Honor. Just nobody wanted to play it. They were all playing Call of Duty. And the same might be about to happen to Call of Duty. We might have gone full circle. And it's great for me because I've always really liked Battlefield for the atmosphere and the combined arms warfare and just how really good it presents itself. And it's doing something different from all the other shooters. It's not just, you're running around in a map that's full of indestructible terrain, yet somehow, you're firing high explosives and rockets and things at each other, yet it's not doing anything to them. You know, we're in a world in which, combined arms warfare has been a thing for the better part of the last 100 or so years now, and yet it isn't represented in our games. And so none of it really feels like you're really in a proper fight. Yet Battlefield as a game manages to do that. And there are other games that have attempted this, but none of them do it quite as well. A lot of them get stuck in the weeds trying to be some kind of military simulation game where they've got, a separate button for crouching, going prone, and standing up, and, a different button for each different fire mode on each different gun that you happen to be carrying at the time, where the whole thing just becomes a convoluted mess of controls as you play finger ninjutsu on your keyboard. And the thought of playing this on anything other than a computer is completely unthinkable, so it could never move on to console. And somehow, whilst doing all this, the graphics are kind of meh, and yet it doesn't have. I mean, I'll be honest, like, there's only Battlefield and the finals really get the destruction physics for these kinds of games done right. And ironically, the finals, though it's not a combined arms like military sim game or anything, it is made by ex-Battlefield developers, so it kind of makes sense that it plays like that. But like, there's just nothing quite like this out there. And I've seen many attempts to do that, and they just don't manage it. Battlefield, it's not a military simulator, but it's got enough of the important features of them, and the atmosphere and the combined arms and things, but it's casual enough that anyone can kind of pick it up and play. And most importantly, again, it's got that feeling and that atmosphere that this really is, as the title suggests, a battlefield. And it's brilliant for it. And it's come at a perfect time to just absolutely make Call of Duty suffer for its mistakes this year. Like, Call of Duty is really, it's suffering for its sins this Christmas. It's Call of Duty. And I think that they do need like a cooling off period or something to figure out how they're going to go forwards developing the franchise and things from this point onwards with Call of Duty. And Battlefield is acting as their punishment for all this, and I'm glad to see it doing that. And it all comes more so at a time where, because this is truly fantastic, like a number of years ago I was complaining about 2042, and it was a genuinely terrible game. Battlefield probably hasn't had a smooth release since Battlefield 1. Battlefield, I'll be honest, Battlefield 4 felt like Battlefield 3, like almost like an expansion for it. Battlefield 4 was the game that 3 wanted to be. It felt more like Battlefield 3.5. Battlefield 1 didn't use the theming enough. Like it was Battlefield with a World War One coat of paint. There weren't like awesome battles where you'd charge for trench lines with artillery going. There were nothing really like that in there. It's like they tried to shoehorn the Battlefield gameplay style into World War One, and it didn't quite work. It still looked great, played great, had that atmosphere and things, but it wasted the theme, in my opinion. But still a good game, regardless of that. Battlefield 5 had similar problems, but it also had a botched launch where there was missing content. One of the campaigns was missing, the Firestorm mode was missing. And I think some of the multiplayer maps were missing. It was all added by, I think, about March the following year, but that was the problem. It's like, yeah, getting it sorted like the better part of half a year later is a bit on the slow side. And then it never really got the updates and the love that it needed to keep it afloat. And so it just kind of got support cut for it as COVID came about, and then it was just abandoned and forgotten about, which is when a lot of these splinter studios came out from DICE, made up of developers that have basically left after this period, and I don't blame them. Realizing their mistakes over the franchise, they decided to go back to a more futuristic setting and things, and decided to pull everyone in, but then they did the kind of cardinal sins of development, which is midway through bringing in tons of additional people to help, and also swapping game engines. And they did all of this during COVID, which is why 2042 was such a goddamn mess. But it seems they've finally got everything working, and all it took was the motivation of a massive amount of Arabian oil money. all the Saudi oil money that motivated EA to finally pull their finger out, and we finally get Battlefield 6, where they've kind of pulled it all together. They've been working on the newest iteration of their Frostbite engine from the beginning this time, not changing midway through. They've had all their studios on board to create the game from the beginning, not bringing them on midway through, kind of half-assed and half-hearted. They've not done that this time. They've all been there from the start, and the difference is very noticeable. They've also got some new senior staff in because they'd basically lost everyone with the last turnover of staff and things, so they've had to... I think they got the guy who did like the Halo franchise or something in on this, and yeah, it has been a huge success. It really has been. And I'm glad to see it as a Battlefield fan. It's nice to see that it's back on track. It's not perfect. The vehicles, for example, you can't get like crits on vehicles anymore, like damaging the tracks, the turret ring, that sort of thing. And there's lots of little things that aren't great. The campaign was very lackluster, and so there's been issues with it, but the portal mode has been improved. Lots of other things have been improved, and the base version of the game itself is absolutely fantastic. It's a very good platform on which to build, and so I think over the years, as we see more from this game, it's going to become much, much better, and it actually is going to be this content platform that EA have wanted it to be for all this time, on which they can really build a live service. Though that said, the first Battle Pass was absolutely crap. But what I want to say is I'm really looking forwards to seeing what they come up with in 2026, what more they add to this game as it moves through its lifespan, and what they do with the next one in the franchise. Like, what's Battlefield 7 going to look like? You know? So I'm looking forwards to more Battlefield again, and it's a nice change of pace. Like, as I say, it's nice to end. Like I always front load these with the bad games of the year, and then move on to the good stuff and my predictions for next year, so we can kind of end on a high note. Because I think we all need something nice for Christmas, and Battlefield 6 this year has definitely been one of those nice things that I want to mention here. But of course, then we're moving on again because our next award, we've got two more left. We've got the best indie game of the year and the best game of the year to come up. And so, yeah, one thing that I want to mention before the end here is one of my personal favourite games this year, but it won't be winning the award, and I'll get into why. But Monster Hunter Wilds, a genuinely fantastic game. Full series is up on the channel. Mostly just put it up because I was playing it. I knew I would be playing this for like a month and I wouldn't be touching anything else, and something has to go on the channel, so you got this. Though I think not many people watched it because obviously every big YouTuber was covering this at release. But Monster Hunter Wilds, genuinely one of my favourite games, period. Not just this year. This has been amazing. I've really liked it. Since recording this, I've put something like a couple hundred hours into this game. I've recently been playing the final title update, trying to get the Gogmazios armor set, and my god, I cannot get that thing to drop a gem at all. I think I ran the numbers on it. By this point, I should have got about 5 gems off of it, given how many I've killed. I've killed like somewhere in the mid-20s of them, and yeah, should have got about 5 gems based off of rewards at this point with the drop chances. I've got 1 and I need 2 for the armor set. It has been a massive pain. But yeah, that's what I've been doing in between eating mince pies this Christmas. And the game, it has been stunning. Like, they've really upped the production value, and the story and cutscenes have been fantastic. Something that the last one really just floundered on was its presentation. Like, it was an amazing game, but its presentation was really poor. Like, you wouldn't think it, but it really was. And yeah, it just, instead of having like proper cutscenes and voice acted lines, the NPCs would just have dialogue boxes and things, and it's not just a problem with Monster Hunter. I think just Japan in general has always been a real stickler for this stuff, just cheaping out on proper cutscenes and voice acting and things. And I can kind of guess why, because I can kind of understand why, because they'd have to, like do it in Japanese and probably then English and all that. But Western studios have been doing this for decades, and it's about time that they got with the program here. It's like, look, your story does actually matter, and the presentation is important. Like, we want you to present this to us in a really cool, flashy way. Like, we want you to make this look cool. Please stop not doing that. But yeah, I mean, you can see it on the screen here. Like, it looks so much better. Like, this is so much better than just text boxes. It really is. But genuinely a fantastic series, and it's not just that they've upped the presentation. The whole thing's open world now. That itself is a massive change. So you've got these massive open world areas. I think during the campaign as well, you travel between them. I'm not sure if you can do that in the actual, just when you're walking about. I might actually have to try that. but I'm fairly certain that that you can basically move between all these areas. They're interconnected and travel the entire length of them. So it is an open world game, and it's genuinely fantastic. Like, it really makes the world feel that much better, and it's just really nice to be able to like walk out into the world, hit a monster, and you're just in a quest. So it's taken a lot of the friction out of the gameplay. It's really smoothened it out. It feels really slick now. And it's not just all these little quality of life things and the presentation stuff. It's the cutscenes as not cutscenes. It's the gameplay as well. But I will say these cutscenes are pretty badass too. But it's the gameplay has been improved. It was already good. Now I think it's probably closing in on flawlessness now. We're getting to a point where these games from like these Monster Hunter games, like the combat is fantastic, right? The combat is just amazing. They've really improved it. The new focus system is great. One thing I really like as someone who uses Gunlance is you can use the focus mode to kind of make your character hold the shield in the direction that you're aiming at, rather than it be the direction you're moving at. Just like a little thing like that really helps with the combat. And you'll always swing toward where you're aiming toward when you're using the focus mode, which means if you miss a monster slightly with an attack, if you quickly focus mode in and like aim at where the monster is, your character will kind of like sort of lean and stretch themselves out in that direction so that they can just about hit what would have otherwise been a near miss. It's a nice touch. Again, they've like finessed a lot of the combat in this one, so it's really good. But of course, the reason why it's not got Game of the Year, and it's not just because, I mean, let's be honest, there's an obvious winner here that I've not mentioned yet. You can probably fathom a guess, but the reasoning that it comes down for me, because I personally, if I could personally pick a Game of the Year and say just purely based on the gameplay and the game, just my experience of the game alone, I would give it to Monster Hunter. So that's what I'm saying. Like, I personally would give it to Monster Hunter, but it's not all just about the game. Because Monster Hunter comes with a little story around it, which is what happened during its launch. And it's literally that reason that I'm probably not going to be giving it Game of the Year this year. Even though I would love to, just to be different from everyone else, and because I absolutely effing love it and have really enjoyed my time with it, I'm thoroughly impressed and everything, but it doesn't get it, because at launch, you see, Capcom needed to make a bit more profit so that they could claim to have made 10% or more additional profit year on year for the 10th year in a row on their yearly earnings report. Yep, it sounds really boring and dull, but this is what happened. For that reason, they needed Monster Hunter to release by the time they did that yearly earnings report. Which meant that Monster Hunter had to release by then. It had to. And it wasn't ready. The console version was pretty much there, but if you've had the unfortunate experience of playing the PC version, which one of my friends who I was trying to play through this with ended up getting, you will have had a horrible experience of repeated crashes and shaders not working correctly, right? So he stopped playing the game. I should have been playing this with a couple of friends, but I couldn't because I have the PS5 version. They all have the PC version. And so basically, I ended up playing it alone and not enjoying myself as much as I could have. But also, they had a terrible experience because they got a horrible port that barely worked. And Capcom have just announced that alongside their final few updates to Monster Hunter, keep in mind this will be nearly a year after release, they're finally putting in fixes for people's main concerns and issues that they're experiencing on PC a year after launch, nearly, right? So nearly, again, it is boggling that they would do that because they wanted to keep hitting those quarterly content releases as well, because they've been releasing content every about 3 months or so, doing these seasonal events. So yeah, that's a whole thing. So pretty much due to corporate greed, a game that probably should have been releasing close to the end of this year has ended up releasing way earlier, not being ready, and being a bad experience for, well, a bad play experience for everyone on PC, purely because they wanted that money now for a report, rather than just saying, oh, well, I guess we'll just make twice as much next year, because there'll be Monster Hunter and Resident Evil ready then. And it's just put a really nasty down, and again, the reasonings for it are just so, like, vain and greedy and, like, petty. That's what really gets me with it. Like, that has ruined an otherwise perfectly good game, and I'm really annoyed about it. I almost gave this the most disappointing game of the year award, but then I remembered that Doom Dark Ages was a game that existed. I had nearly forgotten about it. But I nearly gave it to this because it really is one of those, I'm not angry, I'm just disappointed, guys. I really am. Because this was going to be the Monster Hunter that finally, like, Worlds had kind of made it more mainstream and got it popular. This was the first game after that, and we were finally going to see, like, oh my god, it sold a bajillion copies, and it's it really wanted to cement itself as a massive new franchise that everyone's going to love, and no, it kind of just fell flat on its face, and it's a bit disappointing because of that. But if you play the console version, or wait till these fixes have eventually come out, which they should be doing shortly after this video, you'll probably find it to be a really, really good play experience. It's extremely good as a game. It's just, again, it's all been poor optimization and porting issues. And it's a real shame to see that hold it back. But, of course, there can be only one. And I'm going to announce the game of the year before I do indie game of the year, because I think saying, that this hasn't won indie game of the year would have probably spoiled it, because it's like, yeah, I want the indie game of the year to be kind of looking at, the actual, like, tiny teams and little solo devs that have really, there've been a load of them this year, and I want to kind of celebrate that. So, but of course, yeah, we do have to give its moment in the sun, even though I'm not giving it indie game of the year, even though it probably will be, but I'm not giving it that. I'm giving it game of the year, and I'm letting the others have a bit of a spot to shine on in that other segment. But this is, of course, Expedition 33. It is genuinely fantastic. There's a full review available on the channel. This is some footage from that. It's a stunning game. And it's interesting to me because, again, it's like, the way I would describe this game is it's not a game I would normally play, and it really isn't. I would not normally play this type of game. I dislike things that are turn-based. I particularly dislike these types of games where it's, this Final Fantasy-esque, Final Fantasy-esque sort of, everyone line up in a row and we'll all take turns. I hate these kind of battle sequences. But in spite of that, I've still played it and really, really enjoyed it. And I think it's down to the fact that everything around that is excellent. So, so again, personally, this type of combat I dislike. I really do. I will just be clear on my bias here. If I see a game with this type of combat, I will avoid the game. right? I will not purchase it. But when I was looking at this, the graphics, the story and cutscenes, and the like the music and atmosphere and things, and all the presentation around that, like every other thing around the combat looked fantastic. And as a version of this type of combat, like, this is excellently done, right? I don't like this type of combat, but this is a particularly good iteration of it, which most games don't often get right. And because of that, in spite of it all, I gave it a try, and especially because it was on Game Pass. But even if it weren't on Game Pass, like, the game is half the price it ought to be, really. Like, this should be a full priced title at like 60 quid. It was about 35, I think, at launch. It's ridiculously cheap for what it is. So there's really nothing to argue with here. Like, you are getting more than just bang for your buck with this thing. But yes, the game genuinely, it's because everything around the combat was so good, it kind of made up for it. Like, again, I would not normally play this, and yet I played through the entire game on a weekend and thoroughly enjoyed it. It was fantastic. The story is interesting and unique with some good twists and turns. The music has been fantastic. The the voice acting, the performances and everything have been amazing. The characters and the design and the art direction of the world. And because of the world setting, I'll not get too much into spoilers, but because of where it is set, you get some really cool, surreal looking environments. I mean, if you look behind in this scene, it's like, yeah, this giant, like, ruined ice castle subway thing, right? It looks crazy. And it's absolutely fantastic. And yet there's every area is like this. They all look absolutely surreal and fantastical. The enemy designs are really good as well, and again the character designs, and it's not just like graphical fidelity, it's art direction that is fantastic in these games. And so yeah, as a result, it really does deserve that Game of the Year title. I've got a full review on my channel if you want to take a look at more in depth why I think this game is so good. But I do agree with the Game Awards show that yes, this deserves to be absolutely showered in praise, and pretty much for all of its categories that it was nominated for, almost, it was worth it winning. Basically, it blew everything away. And I really mean it when I say this. Like, I think extra respect, like, I have extra respect for games from genres that I don't normally play when I end up playing them regardless and really enjoying it. Like, to me, this game is probably like an 8 or a 9-ish out of 10, right? I would think that it's a very good game that I really enjoyed. But, as I say, I know my bias. I don't like these types of games. So for it to get me to play it and for me to think that highly of it, I tend to think like, right, so for people who do love this kind of game, this will probably be talked about 10 years from now, and it will probably act as a basis on which other games will kind of copy themselves. Like, other games will use this game as an example for how to go about doing things. So yeah, it's again this is probably like, again, if I were to take my bias out of it, it's probably like a 10 out of 10, like gold standard for the genre. That, like I say, a lot of other games will probably use as a benchmark to compare themselves to in future, and use it as like a baseline of how to go about making other games in this genre. I think similar to how, like, Baldur's Gate 3, again, it's turn-based and requires like 100 hours of time to complete, so I avoided that one, even though I heard fantastic things about it. But just looking at it, I know that that's an excellent game. And people will be talking about Baldur's Gate for, another decade. In the same way that they talk about Half-Life and Minecraft. So, Expedition 33, as I say, absolutely deserves it. And again, it's more just like, I think the combat is just not for me, but everything outside of it is amazing. Even like when you go back to the map and explore and stuff, it's fantastic. And I think it really puts everything else to shame. And the thing that really seals the deal for me, and I mentioned like Capcom, it's with Monster Hunter, it's a tale of corporate greed screwing over the game and its chances. It's the absolute opposite here. So Ubisoft, and I almost put Ubisoft up there with Microsoft with Call of Duty this year, but Ubisoft, who have this year done so poorly that they have literally broken in half like the Titanic, right? Because they've been making such boring, safe, samey games for the past, couple decades at this point that no one cares anymore. But these are all, well, the lead developers at this studio, which I think it's called Sandfall Interactive or something, but Sandfall as a studio, their leads are all ex-Ubisoft, and some of them aren't even developers, they're like marketing people who just wanted to make better stuff. But yeah, they're ex-Ubisoft. That's who's heading the team. And they've broken away from a company that makes safe, samey games. And with just them and a bunch of university graduates, have put together a team that have made this. And granted, there was an army of outsourcing for this. But even still, and it's funny, like people have been trying to calculate their costs, and they reckon that they were reckoning at first that it were maybe like in the multiple tens of millions, but they're reckoning it might be as low as 10 million for this game at this point, which, considering how well it's performed, is practically miraculous. To make something like this, keeping in mind that a lot of games now, like big AAA games, are well over 200 million. We're talking, like 5% of their cost here, right? So somewhere around 5% of the cost of a normal AAA title. And that was, AAA titles coming out recently. Ones that they're making now, as inflation's going up and things, it's probably looking closer to between 3 and 400 mil. GTA will be a ridiculously costly game, no doubt. And to have just and again, keep in mind we've been talking about Mind's Eye in this as well, where they just, it looks like, ran out of funding to finish the game off. Sandfall here performed a miracle by comparison, right? They didn't need millions and like hundreds of millions of pounds to be able to do this. They did it with just tens of millions and a tiny team of university graduates, and absolutely just obliterated basically the entire industry. So yeah, and they did so while making a game that they felt genuinely passionate about, and that really comes through in the game, and it's why it has likely won literally everything. So it gives you, you've got a nice underdog story where they've risen away from the corporate, playing it safe and corporate slot machine to make something truly artistic and beautiful. Which again goes completely in contrast as to what happened at Capcom this year, which is why, even though I love Monster Hunter, I cannot in good consciousness bring myself to say, oh no, the way that they're doing things is the way that we should go about it. No. And I think this might be, and I'll be mentioning this in my predictions for the upcoming year and years to come later on, but I genuinely think we're seeing something very big happen at the AAA and like AA indie level at this point, where we might be seeing a bit of a changing of the guard soon with who are the biggest players in the industry soon enough. Right, but yeah, very interesting to see this come to the fore this year. And so we get then to the Indie Game of the Year award. And I want to just mention, I've got a list here, hang on. Now, obviously, another competitor for the Game of the Year award will be something like Silksong, and I kind of see this as like the problem with Silksong, like I was just mentioning how Expedition 33 was so good that I overcame my distaste of that type of combat and genre to play it. Whereas with Silksong, I didn't. I'm not really into platformers, and I'm not really into Metroidvanias either. I dislike both. I don't really like basically having to backtrack for things and remember where things are and stuff. A Metroidvania would literally have to have like a really good map system that kept all of that on the screen. And well, like have like some kind of journal or something where you are just keeping track of all that for me. It'd have to have a good map system so that I can remember where I need to go, what I'm doing, all that sort of stuff. And from what little I've seen of Silksong, because I have watched a playthrough of it, but I've not played through it myself. And Silksong really seemed to be a game where you just struggle to know where you even are or what you're doing half the time, and it looks very difficult in terms of the platforming as well as the combat, and it seems to be designed around people who have played the first game, so I avoided it. But again, I want to just recognise, like, yes, honourable mention, apparently it's really good. If you're really into platform, uh, like platforming games, Metroidvanias, and Souls-like stuff, it's probably right up your alley. But the only thing there that resonates with me is the Souls-like stuff. Everything else, it's a bit, eh. But there's been a list of these this year. There's been Schedule 1 I've enjoyed quite a lot. There's been stuff like Ball X Pit, Mega Bonk, Clover Pit, all made by like a small handful or sometimes even just a solo developer in many cases. We saw Balatro last year take away like several awards and things and do really well, but this seems to be a continuing theme, and if anything, it's accelerating. I think that a lot of the AAA games in chasing generic live service games are leaving a lot on the table, so to speak. It's like there's this huge gaming audience wanting lots of different things, and they seem to be only interested in covering one or two genres and game types, and the indies are just mopping everything else up. In particular, and this is the thing, so we've had loads again of these amazing solo or tiny team games made there. Just recently, I've been playing some horror games, Routine and Total Chaos, which seem to be very well put together, very good. And even recently on my channel, I've been playing through a series of indie games, from The King is Watching to what else was it? He is Coming, Moonlighter 2, Monsters Coming Rock and Road, War World 2, loads of brilliant little indie titles that are all, less than like 15 quid, all available on Game Pass. It's kind of ridiculous. And I'm genuinely amazed at not just the quality but the quantity of these things. Like, there are some crazy things coming out of the indie scene at the moment. And what I really wanted to highlight in this section this year, and the reason why again I didn't just give Expedition 33 both awards, I want to highlight kind of the evolution of an old favorite genre of mine. So when I was still at like university and high school and things, one thing I loved to do was have a few mates around. You maybe get mates around, get like a pizza or something, and you'd put on, they'd stay at afternoon and you'd put on the PlayStation like a co-op game, something silly, Worms or Crawl or Overcooked, yeah. The original Helldivers game, these sorts of things, these couch co-op games that were really chaotic and things like that. It's like these chaotic co-op games. Castle Crashers, brilliant example as well. Um, I loved these things, but I think now we're seeing a comeback of them. But yeah, I think we're seeing a full-on comeback of this type of genre. But the thing is that now that everyone's kind of a bit estranged, I think like my generation, uh, who I think play more games than previous generations, I think that's just going to be a ongoing thing going forwards now. Games have become much more mainstream. You know, underneath millennials, Gen Zs will play far more games. Yeah, Gen Alphas below them will play even more. It'll be even more ridiculous, and I think that's just going to be a thing going forwards. But my God, just the amount of like these co-op games, just it's been diminishing over the years. Like there's not been as many of them, or they've not been particularly great. And I think what does it is that we've changed how we play now. Like as I say, a lot of people, their friends aren't super close by and can just pop round anymore. Especially as you get a bit older and you've all got work and commitments and things. So being able to do that's difficult. However, we've seen this year that a lot of these indie games are multiplayer co-op, and hence the B-roll footage here. Um, I have found myself playing through and watching a lot of Peak on YouTube and things, and it has been fantastic. Like I played through it with some friends of mine. It's not something I've been recording, so I've just brought something up on YouTube here. Just muted it in the background for B-roll, but I've been playing it with friends and managed to get through like the first two climbs or something now, and it has been fantastic, like genuinely fantastic, and it reminds me a lot of when we used to all come round and we'd be all sat on the sofa just yelling at each other as we blow each other up by accident on the first Helldivers game. But you see more and more now. Like it started with games last year, and well, in recent years, like with Helldivers 2, Lethal Company, that sort of thing, where it seems like they capture the spirit of these old co-op games, but they, whilst they capture the spirit of them, they've moved it online. They've moved to multiplayer, and they are so much better. And so now you can enjoy all this fun whilst you're not like inviting friends and that to your house or anything like that, and you can just do it in the evenings. So a lot better. And I think we're going to see more and more games like this coming out. And just this year, just to name a few, we've got there's been Peak, there's been Headliners, there's been Mimesis, there's been what else? Are They There Yet was a more recent one. Um, some really, really good, like chaotic couch co-op games that are now just multiplayer focused instead. And I would say that Helldivers 2 the other year, which I named my game of the year, falls into this category. Sure, it's a bigger, more polished one, but this is what it is. And this genre that people are dubbing friend slop, it's like, yeah, Helldivers 2 is friend slop. What of it? You might think that's derogatory or whatever, to call them friend slop, but I think it's like, no, that's I personally would call them like chaotic co-op games or something like that. But it's basically, I don't think that game designed for friends is a bad thing. I mean, if you think that, then you think the original Left 4 Dead 2 game is bad. But I think we're seeing a genuine like renaissance of this type of game, now that they've started designing around multiplayer instead. And I am all for seeing more of that. Like, I am loving these little games. And yeah, I very much look forward to see what comes out in the years to come and where we go with these. And of course, that brings me on to winner of the Indie Game of the Year. It's like, well, honestly, I would give it to R.E.P.O. And purely because R.E.P.O. is kind of these games, it's probably the one with the best gameplay. It's got the most, you know, it's got the most developed gameplay, I think. I'd probably put Peak in a close second though. But yeah, it's been an interesting one, like R.E.P.O. this year, and B-roll footage in the background here. I've just got it straight from their channel. Like, the developers put loads of updates up, including videos of themselves playing the game, so you can never accuse them of not playing their own game and not understanding the community or anything. They're very active, they seem to be keeping updated. Again, it's got the most interesting mechanics, the most fleshed out mechanics and gameplay of these types of games. And it seems like they are, and again, it's like not just it's all fleshed out that, but they're constantly updating it. I mean, the level that is going to here, the Museum of Human Art, is a new level that they added a few months back, right? So it's just constantly updated, getting loads of, and they seem to understand as well that it's not just about adding these updates in and adding new items and new maps and things. Like, they add genuinely funny items. Like, they seem to understand that it's like they need to keep up with like the comedy aspect of it. Like, they've recently just decided to start adding walkie-talkies to the game, and when you use them, the walkie-talkie literally like comes to life and things. If you watch it, it's very funny to watch. But there's an item that they've used there where it was a money blender, and as you carry it, it turns on and it starts losing value as you do so. And it's a good mixture of just the funniness, the moments of like genuine like horror and scariness with the monsters, and then just these crazy chaotic parts where that you just get in these types of games. And they've done a really good job of like mixing all that together, and again keeping these really good gameplay mechanics and things like that. Like, there's full-on upgrade systems, and there's a whole massive slew of different items and that you can get, not just from in the areas that are actually usable, but lots of items you can get from the shop, from like shotguns to grenades and things to help deal with the constant onslaught of monsters. And so I think of all of them, it's definitely the most fleshed out and interesting, and creates the funniest moments. I would probably put Peak as a close second on that, but I'm not going to go through all of these games, going into exactly why I think that they were close on the system this and that, but there's way too many. But indies have absolutely knocked it out of the park this year. I cannot stress that enough. They have absolutely nailed it this year. And this kind of moves into my predictions for the coming year, in all honesty. So, yeah, my predictions of the coming year. So, last year I predicted that AI would still keep trundling along and it would do better and become more prominent, though it might take, I think even last year I said it was a longer term prediction and that. But I've been predicting for a while now that mods and indie games will become more important as tools and like assets you can buy off of stores got better. So indie games would kind of come to the fore on this, and they would literally just start replacing AAA altogether, right? I've been saying that for a few years, basically since I've started doing this now. Since then, I mean, I think it was this year we got the Fallout London release, I think it was. I'm trying to think if that was this year or last. I think it was this year, but yeah, we've had Fallout London and Fallout Sim Settlements 2. I believe that uh, even though we've had the Oblivion remake this year, there's the Sky Oblivion mod coming out imminently, and the Sky Oblivion mod, which again that should release, and we're just seeing these huge game-changing, like massive mods coming out constantly, and these crazy indie games now, like they really started with like these crazy indie games last year, but it has, like the line has gone up and above and beyond this year. It really has. Like indie games are absolutely sticking it to the rest of the industry at the moment. So I just wanted to kind of point that out at this moment that, yeah, indie games really, really are like, and modders, like we're seeing these really take off. It's just a continuing thing at this point. And I do think that it's a trend. It's going to keep happening. I don't think these are one-offs. And even Sandfall Studios, who made Expedition 33, think themselves to be at the beginning of a wave where they think that lots of studios are going to start making games like this going forwards, and that they're just the first. Because when you start outsourcing like they did, and then you move your studios to somewhere where it's not as expensive, and you don't hire like loads and loads of people who sit around in meetings and stuff, and you keep everything lean, you can really cut your costs, it seems. And again, they're not the only ones that are doing this. Like, a studio I've been following lately, whose next game is out at the beginning of next year, which is John Carpenter's Toxic Commando. Well, it's made by the people who have done Mud Runner and both Space Marine and World War Z. It's by Saber, who are again fast becoming a more widely known studio due to their work again on World War Z and Mud Runner, and probably more likely that you know them from Space Marine 2, but they're getting bigger and bigger, and honestly, they're probably going to overtake a lot of these giant companies. Like, I think a brilliant example of the bloat that's involved in some of these larger companies is you look at Expedition 33, a game made by ex-Ubisoft developers and some university grads, right? With some outsourcing costing in the tens of millions, right? And at the low end of the tens of millions at that, versus Ubisoft's big game the other year, which was Star Wars Outlaws, right? Which was this horrendously bloated mess of a game that, quite frankly, just it had way too much world in its open world. Like, it was several maps of open world content, like maps worth of it, and because they were all different planets and things, and it was just a giant checklist of tedium and busy work to keep you moving through it and things. And the game itself wasn't all that interesting. And you get on to like say Expedition 33, and it's so lean by comparison. And this is coming from people who basically were working there during that. Well, they won't have been there during the Star Wars Outlaws, but they've worked on previous Assassin's Creed games and things. It's like, yeah, it's night and day the difference between these developers and their kind of development philosophies. But I genuinely think, you look at that, you look at a place like Saber, who are doing something similar with outsourcing and moving their studios away from, like, I think Saber are Eastern European based, I want to say. But they're not like all living in California where, it costs like you have to pay for your coffees in notes instead of coins. It's not a place like that. So yeah, and I genuinely think we're seeing a move away from these because again, like Ubisoft with that, it's such a good example of the bloat that being a massive company brings. Like you just struggle to do anything without it costing you an arm and a leg because they're just too big. But that said, yeah, I think because of that, we're going to see more games move to the east. I think we're going to see more Korean and Eastern European, Japanese, Chinese games, right? Asia and Eastern Europe are going to start really eating up the market because it's so much cheaper to make things there. And it's like the cost of creating games is really starting to just start taking it out of these places. And that's making them need more and more sales in order to be able to do things. We're having to over monetize things, which is making people not want to give them any money at all. And you start hitting all of these problems because of it. So I do think we're going to see more of a shift into these different areas of the world. And it's not just that it's cheaper there, they have an entirely different attitude to making games where they're willing to cover darker themes. We see this from studios like CD Projekt Red and Larian, who I'm on about games and studios here who have managed to kind of ascend from being little indies to becoming these big AAA companies. Well, that's two more right there. Larian and CD Projekt Red are seen as massive AAA studios now, but last decade they were double A indie companies, right? You have to keep that in mind, and they're willing to cover darker topics. They're willing to incorporate more adult content in their games. And you look at the new trailer for Divinity, and I mean, honestly, I say you look at it, it's like, well, you'll not be able to look at it on YouTube. Content guidelines and such, you will not find that on YouTube, and if you do, you'll have to be signed in for it. But they're willing to do that for their next game to make it stand out from the crowd and give an adult audience adult themed content that they want. It's going to be dark, it's going to be gory, it's going to have possibly another scene involving a bear, who knows, but you get where they're going with it. And same with with what we've seen with Cyberpunk and The Witcher, and moving to The Witcher 4. We're likely to see that sort of thing. And I think that's a great thing. And again, we see like a lot of these Chinese, Korean, and Japanese games, and they're not afraid to have really good-looking characters because, and this kind of gets to my next point here, that I said this last year that we're seeing like the death of wokeness in games now, and I think it's purely because what you find is that now I'm not going to say that gamers are some kind of giant, hive mind voting block or anything. We're not, and I imagine that most gamers won't agree with all other gamers on political matters and things like that, and we prefer it if that sort of thing gets stays out of our games. But there are certain things that I think we can all kind of agree on, and I think that one of those things is that when it does come to games, we are very much anti-censorship, I think is probably the best way to put it. I think you'll find gamers generally, if there's one thing that they tend to absolutely agree on, it's anti-censorship. No one likes their games getting covered up and dragged down because of someone else's morality being imposed on you. I think it's something we can all agree. That doesn't mean that we want all games to be degenerate. It just means we want an age rating system. And I think we can all kind of agree on that sort of system, that okay, we slap an 18 sticker on it, and then if you end up playing that and you're underage, and if the shopkeeper bothers to sell you that when there shouldn't be, well, it's not the developer's problem that happened, and they shouldn't be held accountable and so on. I think we can all agree on that. And I think because of that, that's the primary reason why we're seeing wokeness just go the way of the dodo in video games. I think we're all fed up of, getting more Abbies from The Last of Us rather than Eves and 2Bs, We want more sexy characters in our games and a return of boob physics rather than. And then it works both ways. I think everyone would prefer more Dantes and Kratoses rather than, just guys with dad bods and girls whose jiggle physics are applied to their stomach rather than their chest. I think that we can all kind of, like I say, agree with that. And I think that China and Korea in particular really they have noticed this. Now, the question remains is whether or not they can, because this is the problem that they've got, is that they're all bloody mobile developers and they think that all their games should be built in a similar way to how they do things on mobile, which they really shouldn't be. So they still make them as if they're all bloody gacha games where you have to where girls are collectibles and there's a million different currencies and all sorts of nonsense to it. I think a game that really embodied that this year was Where Winds Meet. I saw footage of this. It looked really interesting. I'm not really into the whole kung fu aesthetic thing, but I looked at it and it looked gorgeous. But the thing that really stood out to me again was just an excellent character customizer. It really was truly fantastic as a character customizer in that, and all the characters looked great, right? And I think that games like that are going to become more popular, but the problem that you find as well is that with these games is the problem with, again, them being mobile developers is it's just so riddled with crap and gacha mechanics and different currencies and things like that. And not just, again, different currencies and all this nonsense. It's just the absolute like state of the menus and things like that that would put me off those games. Another brilliant example, not to, just have a go at Where Winds Meet, but to have another example that's different from that, like Black Desert Online. I always liked it. I really wanted to love it, and I did go on and got my character like leveled up, like to where the soft cap is. But my God, the sheer amount of crap in that game that's just pulling you in every which direction is absurd. There's so much in there. Like the game is dense. Like there's so much. But we are genuinely starting to see a real moving away from that kind of game, I think. Like we're seeing a moving away from these games that look fugly and awful and like just generic and full of DEI nonsense. We're moving away from that and moving to a world in which, well, put simply, right, not to put too fine a point on it, but yeah, they're literally re-releasing, and this might be Amazon Game Studios' first major hit, but they're re-releasing Tomb Raider, the original one, right? And yes, she's back in her short shorts, and it was announced just then, yep, with a zoomed in shot of her ass. Look, there's another. There you go. I think we're seeing a return to, I guess, what you would call maybe beauty standards in games. And I think things like, and I mean, again, the acrobatic jumps and movement are back. But yeah, I mean, this is going to be interesting because Tomb Raider came out a bit before my time. it's like a 90s game. I wasn't really playing games as hard as as hard as I do today until in like mid 2000s. So this will be all new to me. This will be like playing a brand new game. I very much look forwards to it. I can finally play Tomb Raider as God intended. But I think this is indicative of just finally an end of this era where we're just going to make things look nice again. And I think it really started, I mean, honestly, I'll be honest, it probably started with the American elections, but I think it really kind of fired up in the games industry in the past few years where we saw an end to this stuff with Stellar Blade, and they actually like censored a bunch of her costumes, and there was like outcry from fans during this time to have them put back to normal. Apparently they found like the original models for the costumes in the PC version or something, and they're like, why aren't you using these? And they found out that the dresses have been kind of touched up in places to reveal less skin, which again sounds really stupid when there's literally a bikini outfit you can get for her. It's like, oh, we can't have these dresses showing a bit extra, but you can definitely wear a bikini. Ridiculous. Anyway. But yeah, I think we're seeing a genuine changing of the guard here away from things like yeah, these old, not great looking kind of woke game. And well, I'm not even going to say woke, it's not really about that. It's about like the uglification of characters, because it's just like, I think it all came as part of that, but now that there's kind of a changing of the atmosphere around all this, we're seeing a return to more like amazing looking characters that are just hot as hell. But yeah, and I think that that's going to be kind of something we're just going to see going forwards, and I'm happy to see it. I think games should be made for the people who play them, not for the people who just write articles about them. If you catch my drift. But yes, so what else? Well, on a similar note to this, there are, of course, games out there like lately we've seen the announcement of Highguard, which has been an interesting one. But yeah, I mean, I think I definitely have something to say on that, and I've got some predictions for that for the future. But none of them are particularly good predictions. It is so generic and all over the place, this game. And I think, again, we're seeing another rejection of this type of thing. It's like, right, here's the, multicolored, generic looking human skin tone rainbow cast for TI reasons that are here. But they all look super generic as well. They've got similar powers to like Overwatch and things, and because like that's the other thing as well. It's like, just the really big problem with this is that it's like, right, if I were to say what I think the issue is here, like, what is this? Like, okay, they're fighting in some ancient ruins, but he's got a shotgun, and then she's using some kind of magic tentacle powers. Okay, so is it magic, but they're using guns, but that's clearly an energy shield. There's airships, so it's like, well, airships are steampunk, but the guns look more modern. But then they're using magic. But then there's energy shields, which would suggest that it's sci-fi, and they're wearing kind of sci-fi-esque armor. But then you've got He-Woman. And again, this is why I mentioned, like, it's a little bit woke. It's like, okay, it's, of course, it's a ripped woman who they had pick up the giant He-Man sword. But then again, going back to the inconsistencies in its style and tone, like, that's a siege tower, but with tank traps. But why does a siege tower why is it needed to destroy like this energy shield? Like, that's something from medieval warfare being used against something that's like science fiction-y. And then you've got like an ice elemental troll thing. So it's like it doesn't know whether it's sci-fi or whether it's steampunk, whether it's fantasy, whether it's like they've just thrown a load of different themes into a cauldron and just mixed them together. Like this guy's using that like a cowboy, but then he's dressed like Attila the Hun. I have no idea what it's trying to be. It's so confusing. I genuinely don't know, right? So going back to yeah, still a Blade footage here. Like this it's like okay, I understand this. It's just it's fairly straightforward. It's sci-fi. It's lit like giant uh, orbital cannon things blasting each other. You get the setting and the theme and that. It's like you get it immediately. But with that other one, it's just so confusing. And again, all the characters looked like cosplayers or something. It really looks like Concord, right? It looks like, and this is the other thing as well. Like, can you tell me what kind of game it is? I still to this day don't know whether it's like a a first person MOBA, a battle royale, or some kind of like extraction game. I still don't know. I'm going to be very interested to see what happens when it releases into being free to play in January. But my God, it looks like a confused mess of like everything and nothing. It's like a vapid vacuum of a game. Like there's no soul to it. They've just like cobbled parts together into this Frankenstein monster of a thing. Right, just ticking off what they think people find cool so that they'll buy their game so they can sell them bloody costumes for the characters that they don't care about. Which is another thing, by the way. Why do hero shooters keep selling themselves as first-person experiences? I think Marvel Rivals clearly proved the point that if you can see your character, you care more about them. So you should probably make it third person, moron. You know? Just putting it out there. It just seems to make more sense. And talking about seeing and caring more about your characters, this is the moment, yep, in Stellar Blade, where it's like, yep. There's a reason this sold well. So yeah, I think we're going to see some changes there in the coming year. Last few things that I'm just going to kind of point out though, yeah. I think that speaking of price and that, so we've seen a lot of these games go down in price, like Expedition 33 and that just costs less than most of the games. Helldivers did last year, that cost a lot less than what it probably ought to, though then they're solely all the war bonds as well. But I think we're going to kind of see more of this. I think that we are finally going to start seeing some of these. I think we're finally going to start seeing some of the savings kind of passed down to consumers. That they're saving in development costs when they start moving things again more eastward. And I think I think a lot of these indie studios are probably going to start off by just undercutting all the AAAs. I really do think that's the thing that they're going to do. And it couldn't come at a better time because, of course, we've got hardware prices with RAM and graphics cards going back up in price. Issues around that. It means that the Steam machine is probably going to cost more. They seem reluctant to put a price out on that at the moment. They're probably just gauging what people are willing to pay, what they can get away with. Probably seeing as well if tariffs and the circumstances change just before launch, because they genuinely might. Like we don't really know where the prices are going to fall for these sort of things. I dread to think how they're going to announce the next PlayStation, and I think we're going to be lucky if it costs 750 or less. I think that'll be a lucky price to pay for the next generation of consoles. I think a more realistic price is probably going to be closer to £1,000. Just what I think we're going to see, because prices have not gone down at all. They've gone way up. And we're not talking, ooh, there's like a 50% increase in these parts. No, we're talking that RAM might be costing, 200 to 300% more, and graphics cards have practically doubled. So yeah, that alone would probably jack the prices up beyond 1,000. And with the Steam Machine being a computer as well, not just a console, it's likely to be significantly costlier than you'd expect. And with it not being a subsidized thing, and honestly, I don't know how Microsoft are going to compete anymore. I mean, I mentioned it earlier in that they get the worst studio this year, but I do think they've just given up on the console war. Now that they're just available on PC, it's more of a point as to why you would get an Xbox for this, because Xbox has no exclusives to it that PlayStation or the PC market don't have. In fact, if you want to play Xbox games, you're better off buying a gaming PC. So then you've got access to Steam on there as well, and all of that platform's games, in addition to the Xbox PC Game Pass, which also is cheaper than the Xbox Ultimate subscription you need on console if you want all those benefits. So I think that the prices are all going to go up, and I genuinely don't know where Xbox is going to go in all this. I do wonder if this will be their last console, or maybe, yeah, well, I think either the next console they announce is going to be their last console, or their current console will be. I don't think they're staying in this race much longer. It looks like they're just giving it up. That said, of course, the reason why all of this is kind of flared up is we see AI getting more prominent. And speaking of AI, I mentioned it with Call of Duty, but also it's been in Ark Raiders this year, with it being used for voice, for like the voices of your characters when you ping things. Like literally, that's all that the whole hubbub's about with all this. Like, voice actors agreed to allow their voices to be used for the game. I think we're going to see more of this. I think voice actors are going to have to understand. It's like, look, you're probably going to have to change how you work with these contracts. You're probably going to have to sign off for your voice to be used for, like, that game. Rather than being paid per hour, per line, whatever, you'll just have to be paid for the game, and then it'll probably get put into an AI voice machine, and they'll do any additional voicing they need through that once they've trained it on your voice. And it makes so much more sense, right? It really does. But yeah, it is going to be a case like doing voicing in this way. It's like, yeah, they'll just have to sign up to have it used for the whole thing. Because the ping system in Ark Raiders, it's like, yeah, they can say every item in the game. If you ping something, your character will say it. Everything is voice acted. They added some new voice lines to the characters, like the actual traders and stuff you talk to in the game, for Christmas. Right? They added some Christmas themed things they'd say. Didn't have to get people in and re-record voice lines or anything. It completely streamlines it, and I think that what we're seeing is it's all going to come down to how you use AI as to whether people are okay with it. Like I say, I think asking me to pay for things created by a robot is going to be a hard ask. It's probably going to have to get a lot better at what it does. Like, eventually we'll probably see that it'll probably create some cool skins and some interesting items and things, and you'll be able to get a lot done with AI. But I think even then you'll probably still want to see that a human ends up touching it up and making it good in the end. But the problem then is, it's like, well, if they're releasing like 1 million items into the shop, right, all cosmetic stuff, you start wondering, like, does it kind of cheapen them, and should we be paying less for them because they've lowered the cost to create it? And it brings into a lot of questions. But I think at least when it comes to the way that Call of Duty is using it to kind of just cheapen the experience, and you're not getting as good quality results from it either, and yet they're asking you money for that, it's like, it's a big no. That's not how I want to see it used. But using it for voice acting, now I'm not saying that voice actors are going to need to be replaced. I think that when it comes to genuine cutscenes for stories, it's going to be a long time before AI can really convey like the emotion and tone of voice and things that they need to get across in these scenes to actually be able to do it. And oftentimes, if you're doing like proper mocapped stuff, you're going to need an actor and actress anyway. So you're going to have to see that. I think, yeah, in these narrative-driven games, I think it's going to be a case of that they definitely are going to still use voice actors. But I think for, yeah, like ping systems and stuff like that, and just generic little voice dialogues, things that aren't that important, it's going to be more AI. And that it makes more sense. But I think in the end, it's definitely all going to turn over to that, because what you've got to remember, what you've got to keep in mind here is what you're arguing for is basically what you would ask a gamer here is you'd ask a gamer, look, okay, do you want to see fully voiced NPCs, right? That basically, and this is not just like something that's probably going to happen. It's like, no, this is already a mod for Skyrim, right? It's not as advanced as this, but what you would probably do is run a large language model in the background, right? Have it keep different conversations, because you can save different conversations with these chatbots. Well, you save a new conversation for each NPC in the game, so that then you've got a memory of what you've said to that NPC previously. So you've got like, well, you've given them memory at that point. They'll remember things. So you've got NPCs who remember, right? When you talk to them, it'll go through this chatbot that will be trained on all the game's lore. So you can imagine like the next Elder Scrolls or Fallout or something, or Divinity or Witcher 4. Next big RPG to come out, it could have all the NPCs having different conversations with you. When you talk to them again, it loads up this conversation again, right? And with this information and that, then it can talk to you using the lore of the game as well that it's trained on, right? It loads all that in, has a conversation with you, has that character specifically, right? And then it runs its response through another AI that will translate the text to voice acting lines. So you'll literally have a dynamic conversation in the game with an NPC who you're going to be who's going to remember you and everything you've said to them. And it might just start with things like companions that you can talk with. It might just start with those, but it won't be long either until they then kind of roll this out to every NPC in a game, right? It will be insane. It will be absolutely crazy, and that's the potential of AI probably using just what we have right now, right? This isn't a, whoa, crazy tech that's going to take years to develop. That's probably what we can do with it now, because you just need to hook up a voice, a voice generating thing up to a chatbot, right? And then have it remember things in like a text file. And as I've said, there's already Skyrim mods that do something similar to this that were out the other year. You've got to argue to players that they don't want this and they would rather have voice actors having a paycheck. Like, what you have to understand is that, look, your job is becoming obsolete. Not being nasty, but I would just say to anyone in that position, like, make your money while you can, enjoy it while you can. You are still going to be needed for doing like proper like cutscenes like this that's on screen now. You'll still be needed for this, where they need like some actual emotion. They need to do some motion capture stuff as well to go with it and get it all synced up and that. But for a lot of just generic dialogue, you're gonna be losing out on work. So get what you can while you can, but understand that this is a limited time deal. Because you are not going to convince players that they don't want to have actual in-game conversations with NPCs. That's kind of like a holy grail technology for games. It will probably have as big of an like the last time we had a technology come into gaming that had as big of an impact as this is probably when we moved to 3D, right? We're going back to that, or like when we came up with the like the concept of like multiplayer shooters, you know, when we put shooters into multiplayer lobbies, you know, it's going to be a revolutionary technology that's probably going to benefit really like big story-driven and character-driven RPGs more than anything else. It's going to be crazy. And worrisome in that if you thought that the AI girlfriend apps that are coming out lately are bad, just wait until you can, you know, have a conversation with Lydia in Skyrim. That's going to be terrifying. But anyway, right. That said, I mentioned Ark Raiders and just a last little prediction to go on. And I kind of said this in a video I did about Ark Raiders, which is available. But I really don't think that Ark Raiders is it. And I will elaborate on that. So, I don't think that Ark Raiders is like it as far as these games go. These extraction games. I still think that, especially this year, having seen, you know, games like R.E.P.O, games at the end of last year like Forever Winter, and things this year like, well, Ark Raiders. It's walking this fine balance of PvP and PvE players, but I generally tend to think that extraction games, I think, are going to split in two. I don't think these two communities can kind of coexist. And I think you're going to get like co-op extraction games become a thing. Yeah. Kind of think of a cross between Ark Raiders and something like Lethal Company or R.E.P.O or something. You know, you're going to see something like that. I think the idea of them being roguelike as well might even tie into it. You know, maybe some kind of like permanent character death as well. But then you like keep your base and things. And with seeing games like Escape from Duckov this year that I think also kind of prove my point on this. That we're going to see, and again that's another one that could have been indie game of the year this year. There's been some crazy good indie games, but we're going to see co-op extraction games become more and more of a thing, and we're going to see less like multiplayer PvP. Well, we're going to see less PvE VP. I think the thing you're going to see is you're going to see PvP ones that are going to be closer to something like Hunt Showdown, where there's not going to be as big of a focus on looting. You might even literally like walk over a player. You might have like infinite inventory, and it just sucks up all the things that they've found into inventory. And you might just go around grabbing things, and it'll just be like plus, you know, 5 generic scrap metal resource, you know, plus 5 electronics resource and stuff like that, as opposed to like a proper loot system like what we normally see from these things, if it has a loot system at all. And then you'll all bundle up together to fight some kind of big boss and each other, again similar to something like on Hunt Showdown. I think you're going to see games focus more like that, versus then games more like Ark Raiders and Forever Winter, but be totally co-op based, and there might be like roguelike with quarters you've to meet like on Lethal Company or something. But I think we are going to see a decisive split at some point where these games go in two different directions, because I don't think you can satisfy everyone at once. And I think that the people who decide to satisfy one audience over the other will claim that audience, and so the only thing you can do is to then create a game that caters to the other audience of this. So you're either going to be PvP or you're going to be PvE, but you will not be both, right? I do think we're moving in that direction. Again, there's a video that I do about Ark Raiders and its attempts to do this. And I mean, a brilliant example, just so you can see on the screen now, you have to like interact and do stuff with everything in this game. But yeah, if you're actually playing it, then you'll find that outside of like trios and duos, like it makes solo play practically impossible because every time you do anything, you're so vulnerable, which I think is what's contributed to why the solo player lobbies are so friendly. But yeah, I think it's a whole thing where it's like, yeah, there's these two competing audiences are just going to go their own ways. I think at this point, I don't think there's any reconciling them, but we'll see how it goes. But I think that's about it. I think I've mentioned everything I wanted to mention. I've handed out all my awards. I've managed to. Oh, I've just gone over the 2 hour mark. I was hoping to keep it just under, but I've gone just over. That said, thank you very much for your time. The channel this year has gone up to over 600 subscribers. I'm very happy about that. Thank you very much if you're one of them, and if you've stuck around this long in this video. And I do hope to see you in future videos in the year to come. And thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you then.